Hello, I'd like to give you an overview of the European Space Agency's Space Biology program, so covering basic and applied and commercially oriented research opportunities in the program. I'm Jason Hatton. I'm responsible for the coordination of biology and environmental monitoring research in the Human Spaceflight and Robotic Exploration Directorate of ESA. And I'll be joined in this presentation by my colleague Lisa Denzer, who's an innovation officer, who will give you an overview of the commercial research opportunities available in our program. So first of all, you may want to know what the European Space Agency is. So European Space Agency is an intergovernmental organization of 22 member states, which are primarily in Europe, also includes Canada as an associate member state. The overall objective of the European Space Agency, which was created in 1976, is to enable the exploration and use of space for exclusively peaceful purposes. And this is actually done across the full spectrum of space activities. So we have programs which cover space science, planetary exploration, human exploration of space, launches, Earth observation, telecommunication, navigation, technology development, and many of the other associated activities with applications of those activity areas. So ESA's sites are located primarily in Europe. The headquarters is based in Paris. I sit at ESTEC, which is European Space Technology Center in Noordwijk in the Netherlands. But in fact, much of the activity is done outside of ESA's facilities. This is done by the scientific research community, research institutes, industry, which actually develops and builds many of the satellites and facilities and systems that we work with and also partner with. So it's quite an extensive European program, and also with partnership worldwide. The overall budget of ESA is about 5.7 billion euros per year, and that covers all of the activity areas. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview of the Human Spaceflight and Robotic Exploration Directorate's program. This is called the European Exploration Envelope Program, E3P for short. So basically E3P is building on the continuous human presence we've had in low Earth orbit and the research activities which have been done using the International Space Station. And now we're moving forward with participating in international missions for human and robotic exploration on and around the moon, and then in the near medium term robotic exploration of Mars, which hopefully will lead to human exploration of Mars in sometime in the future. So spanning this program, there's two areas. One is science, so all of the scientific activities which are enabled or support the program, and this is encapsulated in an element of the program called SciSpacE. And then there is a technology to enable exploration, so the technology for going to the moon, going to Mars, and continue human presence in low Earth orbit. And so this is addressed in an element of the program known as Expert. So if you want to do research activities within E3P, what are the entry points? I'll talk about the SciSpacE program, which is our institutional research program, and then later Lisa will introduce the commercial service providers and the commercialization program, which is another avenue for research activities, primarily for commercial research. So what is SciSpacE? So this is basically a science and application program using a variety of ground and space platforms which are available in the E3P program and enabling access to the unique environment of both the spaceflight or spaceflight analogs. there is quite a large scientific community which are involved in our program across Europe and also worldwide through collaboration activities. So about 1,500 scientists involved in about 200 active projects, and also a few dozen industrial partners involved in many of the applications project. Now, by its very nature, the research which is done on our program is very interdisciplinary. So we may have biologists working with physicists to understand how spaceflight affects biological systems. So we have within the program a framework to support and enable networks. So really across disciplines as well as in specific disciplines. Now, the research objectives of the program are defined in science roadmaps. So the current science roadmaps were defined in 2015-2016 out to a time horizon of 2024, which at that time was considered the expected lifetime of the International Space Station. We're currently updating the science roadmaps out to 2030 because the ISS lifetime is being extended. And also, as I showed on the previous slide, we will have now access to lunar environment, and also there's Mars activities. So it's important to periodically update the roadmaps as the boundary conditions and the opportunities within the program evolve. So this is currently being done right now. We also have applications program to foster applied research. These have we've actually been quite successful, particularly in say the material science area. There's a number of projects which have been developed in this. So I mentioned the research platforms which are available in the SciSpacE element. Now, of course, many of you may immediately think of the International Space Station, but in fact, our research platforms start on the ground with analogs of the space environment, which are very useful for understanding how certain elements of the space environment may affect biological systems or human beings or material science, for instance. So at the top there you see the Concordia station in the Antarctic. We have the possibility to do research at the Concordia station, and this is a very isolated environment, so basically very analogous to a space mission, and particularly a space mission beyond low Earth orbit, particularly during the winter period. It's almost essentially inaccessible for anybody to actually go there or return from Concordia, so it's very useful for studying the effect of isolation. Another important platform is bed rest. So here we have healthy volunteers who may spend between 5 and 60 days in bed with a slight head down tilt, and you can see then that simulates the fluid shift and the disuse which occurs during spaceflight, and you can test countermeasures intervention. You can also increase the gravity level. Here you see a centrifuge which can actually be used with human subjects, but we can also do experimentation with biological systems. We have access to radiation facilities. We have drop tower access. This is the Zarmtrop tower in Bremen, which can give a few seconds of microgravity. We also have other systems such as the random positioning machine, which has a constantly changing gravity vector, and that can simulate some of the effects of the microgravity environment. So these are very important for preparatory experiments, and also understanding how parameters of the space flight environment can affect biological systems. So the flight platforms for short duration microgravity experimentation, we have the A300 Airbus, which is based at Bordeaux. So this can give up to about 20 seconds at a time repeatedly of microgravity. If you want a few minutes of microgravity, we have sounding rockets, so we can launch sounding rockets from north of Sweden at Kiruna. But if you want more than a few minutes of microgravity, so hours, days, weeks, months of microgravity or spaceflight exposure, you need to go to International Space Station. The ESA participates in the International Space Program. We're one of the partners, so we have access to all the facilities shared with the other partners. And this has been the mainstay of our program for for research in low Earth orbit since the last 20 years. And of course, looking to the near future, we're also contributing to the lunar gateway, and so that will also provide new opportunities around the moon, and also with the robotic and human missions, lunar surface, and of course Mars missions. So what facilities do we have for doing research on board of the ISS? And we have we've contributed a number of elements to the International Space Station, one of which is the Columbus module. Now this is shared utilization with the other international partners. There's a number of dedicated research facilities in there, including for biological research. And this includes a cubic incubator, and this is a small incubator. So the common things you typically need for biological research is controlled temperature. You need some interface for putting your experiments into the facility. You may be able to command the experiment in flight. And in fact, these facilities are based on a long heritage, which actually goes back to the time of Shuttle and Space Lab. So we have basically since the 1980s use a similar concept of these multi-user facilities. So Cubic actually builds very much on that. We also have the Biolab facility, which has larger containers, more sophisticated in situ measurements, observation, video observation, direct telemetry of the experiments. So that's another capability. And also something that we have developed is a capability for doing experimentation outside of the space station. So for astrobiology research, we've previously had the exposed facility. Now we have a new exobiology facility, which will also have in situ measurements. Now, a common feature with all these facilities, at least the internal ones, are artificial gravity as well. So we can actually have a 1G onboard reference control, or we can also use that for exploring how biological systems respond to gravity. So you can apply defined gravity levels or gravity doses between microgravity and 1 times Earth gravity, controlled environment for temperature, and these standard interface containers. So this is based on a long heritage which goes back to the time of space lab missions. And now also complementing this are the commercial service provider facilities. So Lisa will explain that later in the presentation, but that gives quite a wide portfolio of capabilities we have on board of the ISS to do biological research. What kind of research have we done in the SciSpacE program? Well, we have done research looking at health. Of course, the space environment is a very harsh environment. You need life support. You have exposure to radiation. It's also an isolated environment. So for the crew that go to the space station, you have physiological changes which occur. You have bone and muscle loss, cardiovascular deconditioning. You have isolation of the environment. So it's important to ensure the crew health. What are the countermeasures you need to counteract these changes? And are there also parallels between spaceflight and terrestrial health, particularly if you have rapid bone and muscle loss? Are there parallels between that and, say, the processes which occur when people are inactive or during aging? The other thing which, of course, is interesting is the general effects of microgravity and spaceflight on biological or physical and chemical processes. So you have altered fluid physics. You can have then alterations in biological systems. And this provides unique scientific knowledge which is useful for both space exploration and also terrestrial applications. So I'd like to give a few examples of specific research which has been done in. So the human, the health relevant research, of course, we can do research on human subjects, either astronauts or healthy volunteers, for instance, in bed rest or in isolation. We can do experimentation on with cell cultures or small or animal models or organ cultures. We also do applied life science research, so looking, say, at wound healing, aging, personalized medicine. These are some examples of the applications-oriented research which has been in the program. Also, increasing in the future for long-term human space exploration, we need research which will reduce the risk for human space exploration. So this is focused research which enables exploration. I mentioned earlier also we have a very large scientific research community which is involved in this program, and also to increase the science return, we are now in the process of establishing a science data center which will enable access to data, so that the raw and processed data from previous experiments, which would allow hopefully further analysis of that data to enable further scientific discoveries. One area of which is of particular interest is also the immune system. So what's been observed actually from the time of Apollo is actually the reaction of the immune system to challenges, infection challenges or things simulating an infection is actually significantly decreased after spaceflight. And so there's a series of experiments which have been done in our program. One of these is the Immuno experiment, which has looked at the T cell function in over 30 test subjects and over a number of ISS space flights. Also, weakened immunity has been observed in bed rest. So again, this is a very useful model for doing these kind of studies. Allows you to have more test subjects than you would have with actual space flight. And also the effect of isolation. This has been also studied in the Concordia station, because indeed changes in immunity may be affected by a number of different. So where do the biology experiments come into this? Well, actually already from the time of space lab missions in the 1980s, there's also been studies done on isolated immune cell cultures, T cells and macrophages and monocytes. And particularly in the SciSpacE program and the preceding program to SciSpacE, a number of cubic experiments were done to explore decreased T cell activation in microgravity. So some of the examples of what has been observed is actually changes in the cytoskeleton in monocytes and T cells, which then impair the locomotion of those cells, and then that can potentially prevent those cells from coming together, which is an important part of immune signaling. So that gives you one piece of data there. Also, there's been a series of experiments which have looked at the gene expression using gene arrays in immune cells during space flight, so in vitro experiments, and this is quite useful then for identifying potentially the pathways which may be involved in these in the response of the immune cells on the spaceflight. So that then allows you to look at these potentially for therapeutic and intervention, also understand the overall process. Also changes in enzymes associated with neurodegenerative diseases involving the immune cells. And also some of these changes can be very rapid. There was a very nice experiment done in the Biolab facility which looked at changes in reactive oxygen production. So when macrophages attack, say, a bacteria, they release reactive oxygen. And if you measure this reaction as it's going on, and you change the G level from microgravity to 1G, you actually see there's a change of the reaction. It takes just a few seconds, and it then goes back to a new baseline, and that takes about 40 seconds. So some of these changes are very rapid, and so all of these provide clues to how the system works under microgravity conditions. So one area which is of interest also is plant biology. So we had a facility called EMCS, which was used jointly by ESA and NASA to study plant biology. And so this was allowed us to look at different aspects of basic plant biology. So this includes gravitropism, so when roots and shoots they respond to gravity. So by doing experimentation on board of the space station, you can apply defined gravity levels. So this allowed us to identify the thresholds of gravity perception here for instance, in lentil roots, which was actually quite low. It was quite a low acceleration threshold. Another aspect which is quite important is also response to light. And in an American-led experiment called TROPY, it was discovered that there was actually response to weak blue light, so instead of red light phototropism. And this was actually normally hidden by the effect of gravity, so you wouldn't have been able to detect this in ground-based experiments. One experiment which is particularly nice is the study of a process called circumnutation. Now, circumnutation was actually discovered by Charles Darwin at the end of the 19th century. He actually wrote a book on the subject. So this is basically plants, when they grow, if you watch them very closely, they actually spiral. There's a circular motion that's called circumnutation. Now, although Charles Darwin observed this, he wasn't sure why it was occurring, and he postulated there could be a number of reasons. It could be something internal within the plant, or it could be that the plant was responding to gravity and it was overshooting. So how do you study this? Well, you need to take away the effect of gravity. So experiment was done called Multigen on board of the ISS using the EMCS facility and applying doses of gravity, turning the light on and off. And in fact, the answer to the question was actually multifaceted. Indeed, it does appear there is an endogenous signal, but that signal is heavily modulated by gravity and light. So these are some of the unique findings which come from doing these experiments in spaceflight. So if we think about what are the activities we do in SciSpacE which are relevant to water and agriculture, one aspect, of course, is regenerative life support systems. If you want to go to Mars, you want to be able to grow food, you want to be able to recycle, process and treat waste, recycle the water. So we have an activity called Melissa, which is actually looking at the bioregenerative life support system. The advantage of a bioregenerative life support system is, of course, it's relatively low energy compared to, say, physicochemical systems, and it allows you to grow your own food. So here you see the basic research done in our program contributes that, as well as research which is done in pilot plants. This is in Barcelona. This is the Melissa pilot plant, looking at, say, algae bioreactors, but also higher plant compartments. So this is very important for developing elements for say a deep space habitat. But there's also terrestrial applications. So if you want to produce food in a confined environment and you want to do that reliably, there is actually a transfer of the knowledge and technology. And just to give you an example, here is an example of a water purification treatment system which was developed and deployed in the Concordia station in the Antarctic, and then that has actually been scaled up and used here in a university. So scale up from a small system supporting 15-20 people to supporting 1,500 people, and using that same technology which was developed for an analog space analog environment, now using in a terrestrial setting. So with that, I think that's a very good moment for me to hand over to Lisa, who will give you an overview of the commercialization opportunities in our program. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Jason, and welcome everyone to our talk. My name is Lisa Denzer. I also work at the European Space Agency, and I'm an Innovation Officer in the Directorate for Human and Robotic Exploration. And I'd like to talk to you about commercial R&D, because I think that most of the things that Jason has talked about already in the past minutes is relevant for private companies, for research institutes, for startups, for entrepreneurs who have an idea and who want to go to space to test it, who want to conduct research in space, but who haven't managed to get one of the very few slots that are available each year via the institutional funding routes. And the commercial access route offers a viable alternative to go to space, because you do not have to apply. The only thing you have to do is to pay. And the cost is, I think, much lower than you might expect already. So let's have a look again. I'll quickly summarize the different markets, projects that we think could be interesting also from a commercial perspective. You see here on the left, biotech and pharma, which I think is very relevant. We see a lot of projects looking at drug design, drug development, and also drug delivery. This goes hand in hand with new approaches in nanomedicine, protein crystallization, which is very important in that aspect, We're looking into vaccine and antibody production. You can do accelerated disease modeling in space. Many of you might also know already that in space you're more prone to suffer from osteoporosis or muscle atrophy. You can look into aging, you can look at wound healing. So there's really lots of different areas of application and research possible. You can do projects, experiments, looking at cell biology. You can have tissue grown. You can do 3D bioprinting. And all of this also leads and feeds into the development of medical devices. You can start developing procedures, processes, services to provide personalized medicine, both to people on ground, which I guess is obviously the larger target group, but also potentially in the future to astronauts and during long duration space missions and travel. And you can also look at wearables, which, especially for astronauts, are quite important to measure their health. And this goes a bit into monitoring, what Jason also mentioned. Looking at the right, if you look at agriculture and crop science, also very interesting approaches here. You can look at the root structures, how they grow, how they develop. You can look at breeding and genetics, flying seeds, crops to space. You can often observe exotic gene expressions, which can inform further development, also both in space and on ground. We have water membrane technology. You can look into pest and soil management. You can develop new production techniques. And then I think a recent trend that's being more intensified is vertical farming and astroculturing. So this is just a subset of opportunities, obviously. We cannot go into great detail with all of them. But let me try to explain just very briefly how it works if you are a company or if you are a research institute or actually whatever entity you are and you want to go to space. Let me just quickly explain.
The nominal process of commercial access to space starts with a customer on Earth. So they define an experiment or a project. This is then being launched to the International Space Station, where we have commercial service providers who are our partners who will implement this project on the International Space Station and then return it back to Earth with a value added. And the value added is derived from the space environment, where you have microgravity, vacuum, radiation, cosmic radiation, and also extreme temperature. One of the commercial services available on the ISS is the IceCube service. IceCubes is a facility inside the International Space Station, and it provides you fast-track regular access. It provides an end-to-end service. That means they'll guide you from experiment definition to launch and also return of your samples and analysis. The cost for this starts at €50,000. That's for one unit, which is 10 by 10 by 10, and it will remain on orbit for around 4 months. Space apps and IceCubes will also be present in this conference, so keep your eyes open for their talk. Another commercial partner is Kaiser Italia, and they are providing the Bioreactor Express service. This service is based on the cubic facility, which you can see here on the right, and it has a centrifuge in the middle, which has space for 8 of these units, and also a thermal control capability. That means you can control the temperature. There's quite a range of existing hardware available. You can see these containers and units, the little images here, and this means that if you can use one of the existing ones, you will be even faster and will be even more affordable than compared to having to develop your own from scratch, which is of course still possible, but more complex. The cubic can in this configuration take up to 24 of these units, which go into a container and then interface with the cubic. The facility is suitable for a broad range of experiments, mostly biology, biotech, human research, also to a certain extent fluid physics and material science. In principle, you can take out the centrifuge, the configuration as it is here, and plug in your whole new experiment, but this would then add an additional cost and probably take much longer. The starting price, if you use one of the available cartridges here, is €160,000. That's for 8 of these, where you can fill in your samples, and they will remain on the ISS for around 14 days, depending on the configuration that you require. If you want to know more, you can go to the website, and I also think that Bioreactor Express is around. If you keep a close eye to the agenda, I think you'll have a chance to learn more about it. And this is our third commercial service, which is provided by commercial partner ASBS, who have developed and built this facility. As you can see here, it's an external platform. It's mounted outside of the ESA ISS Columbus module. It has differently sized modules available here that you can lend to implement your experiments in there, obviously being even more exposed to the harsh space environment. The slot configuration is flexible. You can go for larger or smaller or several of these modules depending on your needs. The price starting here is around €326,000 for 3 to 8 of the units, and they would then also enable long duration exposure up to 1 year on the ISS. And if you want to know more, please have a look at their website to learn more. I'd also like to mention 2 concrete commercial projects that are going to fly to the ISS now in December 2020 on the SpaceX 21 flight. One very exciting project is this COVID-19 drug research project, which is going to be implemented on ice cubes together with the Japan Manned Space Systems Corporation, JAMS, and Kirara for the customers InnoStudio and Cyclolab. And they're going to study the formation properties of remdesivir and SBECD to improve the understanding of the formulation mechanism and elevate drug efficiency. And I think this project really shows why the commercial route is so important and effective, because it took less than a year to form this consortium and go for it, and they're going to launch in 2 weeks. So if there is a need in the market, this is really proving to be the fastest way to go, and I think this is really very inspiring case to look at. I'm already looking forward to see the results here. Second example, second project that is being launched in the same time frame is Bioreactor, which is implemented by Bioreactor Express for the University of Edinburgh together with the UK Space Agency. And in Bioreactor, they're going to study the interaction of microbes in rock and liquid medium. They're trying to inform biomining processes, bioprocessing applications, looking at both rock and regolith. So looking at all these commercial service providers that are now emerging, I think it's also important to keep in mind that sending something to space is not trivial for someone who's never done it before. And that's why we're now developing the Business and Space Growth Network, where we're essentially trying to provide a set of support tools to anyone who wants to send a project to space using the commercial service providers who's never done it before. So if you have an idea or a project, we're going to complement you with a set of support mechanisms that we're going to offer, ranging from technical feasibility, like are you going to have enough power on the ISS, are you going to pass a safety review, business feasibility, especially if you come from a very commercial angle, you will want to know your margin, the actors involved in the supply chain, the cost involved in this. You might need some funding. If you don't have entrepreneurial DNA, it will be rather difficult to know how to go after funding sources. So we're going to help explain better where there are funding sources and how to approach them. Risk sharing is very important. The community is very important. You might have some gaps in your team that you want to fill. You might be looking for experts, for partners. You might want to share some lessons learned. I think cooperation is really important in this. And of course, you'll also need to find the right space access. Right, there is increasingly many different platforms, and you will need to find the one that matches you best. If you now have an idea, if you're interested, if you want to be kept in the loop, please feel free to send us an email. We're going to have a newsletter soon. We're also aiming to launch a digital platform next spring in 2021, which is going to incorporate all of these features, so please stay tuned. And there's one more thing I'd like to mention. Very concrete, we're developing a program, and we're going to put out a call for the first program in November 2020 on our procurement platform EMCS. And in this program, we're looking for a set of projects that build a portfolio, and then we're going to co-fund the portfolio of projects, so to say the program. So what you would need to do is you would need to find the projects for this program. These projects will then be implemented with commercial platforms, so you also need to find the commercial service providers you want to fly with. You would need to mobilize some investment to fund the project portfolio or the program, and ESA would then give matching funding to this program fund. And this would enable you then to develop solutions and products that you might not otherwise be able to do. So we're really hoping to see some great examples. I think especially in the context of this conference, anything related to health, vaccine development, drug development, understanding healthcare applications better, that's all very welcome. So please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions, and otherwise keep an eye on our EMCS procurement platform. For more information, I would recommend to go to esa.int. You'll find a lot more information on human spaceflight and robotic exploration. You can have a look at the SciSpacE open research announcements. You can go to the Erasmus Experiment Archive, where you'll find a lot of data and results from previously done research, including the ISS, but also other ground-based facilities. And you're also most welcome to have a look at the commercial opportunities for space exploration. For example, we also have a call for commercial partners in case that you would like to develop your own facility in space. And of course, you're most welcome to reach out and connect with us. And thanks again for having us, and please take care and have a good day. Bye.